Hi guys, Asmo here, and today I have for you an Ice Trap League Starter build guide. I'm going to give you a blueprint of how you can level and create this character on a league start or on a minimal budget. I have started with this character and it's going really well. It's a very comfy build. At the beginning of the league I knew that I want to play something that doesn't take too much effort, doesn't take too much setup, and I can just do any content I want. Basically the pros of this build is that you can do any content you want. It's good at bossing, it's good at mapping, you can do every single map mode. It doesn't require much investment to get it rolling. You can play it on a really low budget if you want and still do a lot of damage and clear all content in the game. However, if you want to be a little bit more tanky, that's gonna take some investment, and then of course it is very simple to set up, it's very simple to play, because unlike mines, it's just one button that you're spamming and you just hold down one button and your character is just blowing stuff up, and at the same time you're freezing and chilling your enemies. Also, it kind of bypasses some of the issues with mana that you might be having with other skills, especially once you get the Tinker skin. It's really nice. You can play this as a saboteur, which is going to offer you more quality of life, or you can play this as a raider, which is going to offer you more mapping speed, especially if you opt into the shield charge way of playing. However, I'm gonna talk mostly about the saboteur version, but they're not that different. So in terms of the cons, the build is fairly squishy. However, you can make it tanky. It has very good recovery, it has good avoidance, but it doesn't have good mitigation. It's kind of a low effective HP. However, you don't get hit often, you can run through stuff, and most of the time you don't get hit, and when you do get hit a bit, you recover that life super quickly, but sometimes you're gonna end up getting one shot until you invest more into the character. But this is meant to be a league starter on a minimal budget, or basically on zero budget. The way you want to level the character is by the standard setup of Orb of Storms, Frost Bomb, and Stormblast Mine. Very standard setup. You can look up the speedrunning setup. I think Tai Killer has a great run recorded for an Ice Trapper where he shows exactly how he transitions for Stormblast Mine into the Ice Trap. Basically, as soon as you get Ice Trap, you can equip it on a 3-link or a 4-link. You're looking for like 4 green or 3 green and 1 blue, and you're going to be using Ice Trap. You're going to be using multiple traps, trap and mine damage, and then added cold damage or elemental focus, something like that. I prefer to play without elemental focus in the current patch because freezing stuff is really useful, and if you can do that on bosses, you basically just stand in place, hold down one button until they die and they cannot do anything. So it's very comfy and safe to play in that way. In terms of the required items or items that you want to aim for, at first you're gonna have your crafted ones from level 20, and then you're gonna aim for Tabula Rasa. If you can get Tabula Rasa with +2 to the level of a socketed trap, I think it's trap or trap and mine skill gems, but what you care about is the trap skill gems, it's gonna be the most damage you can possibly get. It's gonna suck a little bit on mana, so you're gonna have to have a decent amount of mana that is unreserved, or like a really good mana flask, and make sure that you're using your mana flask properly, and maybe invest a couple points on your passive skill tree into something like the Soul Siphon, where that gives you max mana regen, and mana gained on kill, or maybe something like Mind Drinker, but I think the Soul Siphon would be probably better. What we want is just like mana on kill and mana. This way you're gonna be recovering a lot of mana because the 6th link is gonna eat a lot of it, and with the Tabula you don't have an extra way of recovering it like you have with Tinker Skin. But Tabula is the first thing you're pretty much aiming for. It's gonna give you a lot of damage. +2 Tabula is actually like almost like it's like super good. It's crazy damage on a +2 Tabula. So that's one of the first things you're gonna be aiming for. Next thing that you want to be aiming for in terms of the gear is getting your wands. Preferably you want to get a wand that has +1 to the level of all either all spell or all cold spell skill gems. Ideally you also want on it like increased spell damage or increased cold damage. You can also have added cold damage to spells if you are not going for the unique ring, Malachi's Artifice. You can also have the crit chance, crit multiplier, and then ideally you want to look for something that has one empty suffix, because the suffix that you want to put on your wand is 15% increased trap throwing speed, which will give you on 2 wands together 30% increased trap throwing speed. This will make you throw traps much faster, it will feel much more smooth, and it will be very comfy to play, and it will increase your DPS by a lot and also your clear speed. I definitely recommend aiming for something like that. So this is the ones I went with, and if you are going to go without Malachi's Artifice, I'm gonna show you, I have this ring somewhere here in my stash. So Malachi's Artifice, basically what it does is gives you elemental equilibrium, which means if you put something like Armageddon Brand in it, you're going to be able to debuff a boss with basically -50 to cold res, which is massive. It's an insane multiplier for single target damage. So if you're struggling for single target damage, make sure that you avoid all sources of added cold damage to spells, because that will mess up your elemental equilibrium from the Armageddon Brand, and then just get Malachi's Artifice with Armageddon Brand. This will increase your single target damage by a bunch. It's very nice to use early on, especially if you want to do some bossing. However, I just went for like more generic damage with added cold damage to spells on my wands. So Tabula, the wands, that's your priority. After that, what you're going to go for is the Tinker Skin. Tinker Skin is a massive quality of life. It allows you to recover life and energy shield when your traps are triggered by the enemy, and once you get it, I recommend making sure that you have some energy shield on your character. I have currently 460, and go for the Eldritch Battery. This will make it so that you can reserve extra auras. You can basically reserve all of your mana with auras. That can be Hatred, Zealotry, Scatterbots, Vitality, Precision, whatever you can fit. I definitely recommend starting with Hatred, Scatterbots, and then you can put Bone Chill on the Scatterbots, or just run a higher level Vitality, reserve as much mana as you can, and then you basically throw your traps by just using the energy shield. The energy shield is gonna keep recovering, and you're going to be getting it back as the traps are detonating from the Tinker Skin bonus, and it's gonna allow you to basically spam them non-stop, just holding down the button as much, like doesn't matter how much trap throwing speed you have, you're basically going to be able to spam them non-stop as long as they are detonating on a target. So Tinker Skin is definitely what you want to go next. Start with a 5 link. This will lower your damage actually compared to a +2 Tabula, but it will increase your survivability. It will give you some frenzy charges. It will also give you phasing, so you won't need to necessarily run the Quartz Flask. But this is really important. After that, of course, it is important to take care of your flasks. I recommend having like an instant flask with immunity to poison, for example. I recommend having a diamond flask, onslaught flask, a quicksilver flask, and also quartz flask. This is a good combo that is working for me for just general mapping and bossing, and I find that I don't struggle with flasks. It's pretty good. I don't have 100% uptime on all of them in mapping, but most of the time they're all up, and it's very comfy to use them this way. You can do different setups. I'm still experimenting. Don't mind these different instilling orbs that I have, because I'm like re-rolling them and experimenting with different setups. You can have a setup, for example, where you click on one and then you have the other ones activate whenever an adjacent flask is being activated. You can have them refresh whenever you are at full charges. There are so many different ways of setting them up, so experiment with whatever is comfortable for you. However, I definitely recommend getting freeze immunity, because you're going to be immune to shock and ignite through your ascendancy. So just make sure that you have a freeze immunity, poison immunity, and bleed immunity. Those are the important ones, and you can also have curse removal somewhere if you want, but it is not as important because the cursed map mods are not being removed by this because it doesn't actually grant you the immunity. After those items, the rest of the items that I have are very, very simple. This is just life and res. This is just life and res and movement speed. This is life and res, life and res, life and res. Additionally, what you're looking for as your next upgrade, something that you want to get decent, is the amulet, because you want to anoint it. So a decent amulet would be something that will give you some strength and int, most likely. That's what I would go for. And then you want crit chance or crit multi. You want a bunch of life, maybe spell damage, cold damage, and then you want to have an empty suffix. I have strength here currently, and I have increased flask effect duration here currently because I haven't unveiled the trap throwing speed yet. But you want to make sure that you're doing June missions and unveiling belts and jewelry. I'm not sure which ones it happens, like which one are more likely to give you that, but you can get a mod on a suffix that is trap throwing speed, and this is what you want on your belt and on your amulet. For the belt, you actually want to get a Stygian Vice, and ideally you want to get a jewel that has some fire damage added to spells. The reason why you want fire damage added to spells, and it doesn't matter how much, it can be like 1 to 2 fire damage added to spells, it doesn't matter. But as long as you crit on a target, it's gonna get ignited, and that fire damage burning this target is gonna activate for you critical strike multiplier. It's 40% crit multi for an ignited target, which is going to be a massive increase to your damage. So that's it basically when it comes to the gear. This is very, very simple starter gear. If you wanted to push the gear higher, you can go for the ring that, like, if your other, what's the name of it, the shaper ring, if your other ring is an elder ring, you get spell damage. You can go for Pandemonius amulet, that's something that is viable as well. You can go for also, where do I have it, at series step, that's definitely a good pair of boots. If you have your resistances sorted in the other items, you can go for that. And of course the slave driver's hands, this is something that is for, like, if you have a little bit more investment and you get like good wands with tons of cast speed, you can actually ditch the throw speed and get more cast speed instead, and use the gloves for just maximum cast speed. It would require you to pick up, for example, here cast speed with cold skills, and here cast speed. From these passives, you'd reroute a little bit of your passives to here and just get a bunch of cast speed and have a lot of throwing speed that way with the unique gloves. I'm currently not using them because I just wanted to use the simpler setup. I sold the gloves. I actually found the gloves in the temple. You can farm the temple. Check 2 videos back on my channel, you'll find a guide on how to farm actually the gloves for the trappers. They're pretty expensive right now, so even if you're not a trapper, you might want to know that. But that's basically it when it comes to the gear. You can also go low life, that's a perfectly valid way of playing. And then of course you can just min-max it into oblivion, but this will allow you to clear all content pretty much. The next thing I'll talk about are the passives. So let's start with the ascendancies. First thing I actually recommend getting is probably the perfect crime, because you're gonna need the reduced cost of skills that throw traps. This is something you want to get early on. You actually want to avoid getting chain reaction, because number one, it doesn't give you that much if you're not using cooldown traps. Cooldown traps are something that you can definitely rely on. You can use it to support your skills, but I find that it's better to just throw a couple more stacks of the ice trap than to throw a cooldown trap and then to throw that trap. You just keep throwing ice trap. You're gonna do more damage that way than like weaving in some other trap. So chain reaction is not necessary, because also when your traps trigger and make it so that other traps trigger, that doesn't proc the Tinker Skin, so that doesn't recover your life or energy shield, only the first one does. So this is something that you actually don't want, which leaves you only with this node being 50% increased AoE, which definitely is very nice to use. And as you get better gear, you'd love to have more AoE and invest into some AoE. It's definitely very nice to have as much of it as possible. However, the skill has decent AoE by default, and it is not really necessary. So I would much rather go as a second one for Pyromaniac, that gives you immune to ignite and shock, so you don't have to deal with ignites anymore, and it gives you very nice regen that will sustain you before you get your Tinker Skin sustain. The third one, you can go for the Born in the Shadows, which means you cannot be blinded. Also, enemies who are next to you or hit by you, which counts from traps by the way, they will have reduced damage against you, so this is like 10% damage, less damage taken, and also gives you some movement speed, which is very, very nice. And then Uberlab is just gonna be this one, which is a fuck ton of damage. This one just gives you a lot of damage. In terms of the passives, you wanna route through here. First, you're gonna go through the elemental focus, but then you're gonna reroute it back to the crit once you start going crit. I will post a POB in the description that will have options. Like on the bottom left, you'll be able to choose skill trees like by level, and you'll see how to progress your skill tree. It is very, very simple. We are life based here. We are going for the decent trap nodes that we have everywhere here. This one is anointed. We are going for a bunch of crit. Snowforged is a very, very good node. It gives you crit chance. It gives you cold damage. It gives you cold and fire resistance. So this is very nice early on at lower levels of gear. Then we're going for a bunch of ailment, like crit ailment. Sorry, not crit ailment, cold ailment, which means your cold freezes and chills are going to be stronger, and we're picking up the same thing here. A bunch more crit. You want to go for acro, phase acro. We're picking up frenzy charges because of the frenzy charges improving our mind throwing speed, and then we want to path to the wind dancer. It's a very, very simple basic skill tree, but it's gonna get you through the entire game. In terms of the skill gems, you want to go for the ice trap, cluster traps, or multiple traps. It's pretty much a personal preference. It doesn't really matter that much. If you have a lot of AoE, then multiple traps actually becomes better because you are guaranteed to like overlap everything. If you have less AoE, cluster traps will be a little bit easier to hit a single target with all of the traps. Then we have hypothermia, which at earlier levels, added cold damage is actually better than hypothermia, but once you reach like higher levels of damage, higher levels of ice trap, then actually hypothermia becomes better. Then we've got trap and mine damage, which is still an insane multiplier that hasn't been nerfed. Cold penetration, even though it's not as good on the packs that you're clearing in the maps if you're like hitting white or blue monsters, but we're gonna be one-shotting those anyway, so we only care about improving our damage on bosses, and that's where the cold penetration is actually going to be stronger. And then we've got charged traps, which makes it so that you get critical strike multiplier per power charge, and also 10% trap throwing speed per frenzy charge, which gives me 50% trap throwing speed and I think 60% crit multi. This is a very, very good gem. I definitely recommend using it. It's gonna feel much smoother when you're hitting stuff. Then we're going to I use manually Frostbite, which has faster casting in it, so I just cast it faster. And then I have Bear Trap and Frost Bomb with increased AoE and increased duration, so that it's easier to aim them, and the debuffs last longer. So usually what I do on bosses is I just stack the traps, then I throw down the Frost Bomb and the Bear Trap, and as the boss appears, I click on the Frostbite and just keep throwing traps until they're dead. This is very, very simple setup. You could also use the Malakai's Artifice Ring and put additionally the Armageddon Brand for an additional debuff on the enemy, but it is not necessary. I'm blowing through Conquerors very easy. It's just like the first burst takes like most of their HP, and then I hold the trap button for like 3-4 seconds and they're dead, so it's very, very easy. And that's basically it when it comes to the build. There's going to be a POB in the description that is going to show you different levels of passive skill tree progression so that you can follow that very, very easily. The leveling of this character is very, very smooth, and this is a very simple character to get started in the league. You can do all kinds of content, everything. You can clear everything on this build. You can kill Awakener 8, you can kill Endgame game bosses, you can do invitations, whatever you want to do. Just keep scaling the damage and eventually you're going to do much more damage even than this version. I'm going to probably post another guide for like end game scaling of one of the variations if I'm gonna be scaling this build myself, but that's gonna be it from me. I'm gonna go for like a short 3-day vacation. When I'm back, we're gonna be blasting some logbooks. Thank you guys for watching and see you next time.